Hello! In this tutorial I'll teach you how to show a complex structure in a recursive way. So let's log in our framework, choose the workspace, the project, and let's create a new page called recursive structure. After we have the page editor open corresponding to the page that we created, the recursive structure, the next step is to create a resource with that complex structure so then we can show it in the content region through a recursive way. So first step is to open the main settings, go to the resource tab and click add action. Then we want to create a static list, a static structure, so we need to choose the resource from array. Then we give the name to that resource, let's call it files tree, and the structure that we want to create, basically it is a files tree. It is a list with files, with folders, and inside of that folders we're going to have other files, which could be other folders, which can have other files too. Okay, something like that, that can be recursive. Okay, so first thing to do is to create the group of files, the first file. So each item of the files we're going to have the attribute name, and if it is a folder, we're going to have another attribute called files. So let's call here the first file, which will be the file A. Then let's add another file, which will be the file B. And this file B will have another attribute, which is going to be the files. And then in here we can have a third file, which we're going to call the file C. Inside of the folder B that we have the files, we will have another items, another files, which could be the file, we can put it the subfile B1, we can make it another subfolder B2, and the subfile B3. Inside of the subfolder B2 we're gonna have other files, which can be right away another folder, subfolder, let's call it B21. And like in here we can have a second file, which will be the subfile B22, and in here then we have two other files, which are gonna be the subfile B21, and in here will be the subfile B22, something like this. So let's say that we have this recursive structure where basically we create here a resource called files tree, which basically has three files, the file A, the folder B, and the file C. Inside of the folder B we have other files, which are the file B1, the folder B2, and the file B3. Then inside of the subfolder B2 we have the folder B21 and the file B22, and inside of the folder B21 we have the file B211 and the file B212. Okay, so based on this structure, what you're gonna do is to create here some widgets so we can show that data recursively. So how can we do that? Okay, first thing to do is to drag and drop a div in here, and this div then we want to load that resource that we created, which was the files tree. So we just do what I did, we click update, and automatically here in the properties of that widget I can see, let me expand this so we can see this better, I can see that I'm having here the files tree. Okay, Now I can see that I have the resource here, it will be loaded on page load, but something is missing here. So first of all I need to set a type for this widget. So since I want to show this in a tree layout, so I want to select this as a list group. And now inside of this list group I want to select the handler. Instead of being the handler that was before, I want this to be the load list table and tree resource on page load. Okay, so first step is done. The second step is to drag and drop this list widget inside of that other widget. And besides that, let's just show the canvas, show the borders, so we can see all the items that we have here better. Okay, so when we drag and drop these list items, by default it comes with 3 items. So just delete the other items and just leave one. So basically this one, the same thing, another way to do this is just to drag and drop this list item inside of this UL. It's exactly the same thing. Okay, so next step, we select this UL and we want to set this UL as a list tree UL type. And we want to click then in the list item and we want to select it as a row item. Basically what we are saying to the systems is that for each record, so basically this main div, it will load the tree lists, the tree files resource. So it will load this resource on page load and we'll call this handler. This handler, after you call this resource for each item of this resource, it will replicate this item here, which is the type of row item. It will replicate for each resource, for each record, for each item. So basically it will check that handler. So the handler, this handler here, the load list table and tree, you will check for the elements, the HTML elements, which are from this type, the row item type. And it will replicate them for each individual item. So for the first time, since we have here the file, the item 1, the item 2 and the item 3, it will do this 3 times for the first level. So now what we want to do is to create the HTML that he'll replicate. So what we'll do is to drag and drop a widget inside of this main div. We can erase this, doesn't really matter. And in here we can put something like the file name. And in here now we want to show in the display resource attribute the corresponding attribute to show the name of the file. So we go here, display resource attribute, we go here to the show resource attribute and we put here the name. This name corresponds to the attribute name that you gave here, so we put here name. So if we put here something else, we needed to put that specific label in here. So this is the corresponding attribute name. Okay, additionally we want the name to be appended to this string here, so we just need to go here and click append. Okay, so the first part is done. So if we save this and if we refresh this, we can see already the first level. As you can see, file A, folder B and file C. Now, how can we show inside all the other files in a recursive way? So to do that, what we need to do is to drag another list into here. And in here we can erase all these inner elements, that doesn't matter, that comes by default. Basically we need to leave that UL list empty as it is in here. And now we need to select this UL list, and what we need to do is go to the display resource attributes in here and do the show resource attributes, put the name files. The files is the name is the attribute name that contains the inner list with the files of each folder. As we can see here, it's files. And then we need to select the display handler, which is this one, draw list data recursively. So basically this handler will tell basically what will happen is that the system will know that okay, you are trying to load an object, but this object, you load this object not as a normal handler to display that object, but you need to draw to set the specific handler to draw that object. So this is the handler to draw that specific object, and basically what this handler does is it will search what is the item. So it will search the parent, and it will then to search for the item that contains the row item type, and it will get this item again, and it will append inside of this UL. It will, for each individual record, it will replicate this item, and then it will append to this UL. So if we save and if we preview this page, we can see now that it is replicating this recursively. Additionally, we can, to be more beautiful, we could remove here the file name so we could see this better. So, or we could just make here replace, or I could erase it from here. It's exactly the same thing. So now if I refresh this, I can see that I have the file A, the folder B, and the file C. Inside of the folder B I have the file B1, B2 and B3, and inside of the B2 I have B21, B22, and inside of the B21 I have these two. So this is a very easy way to show recursive data into a tree. So you can use this for menus, for categories inside of categories. So this is a simple example how to show you how can you have in a very simple way recursive data showing, or complex structures showing in a recursive way. Additionally, let's say that instead of showing this in a tree, let's say that I want to show this in a table in a recursive way, but tables inside of tables inside of tables. How could I do that? It's possible too. So to do that, let's just go back to our page editor. Let's set here another div below the div that we created. Let's add some margins here. It's not this one, it's top. Okay, so we can see some difference between these two divs. Now what we want to do is in here we want to load the resource, the files3 resource again, but we need to set the other handler. It's the load table and 3 resource. So what we need to do is to scroll down, go to the type and select the list group type, and then we can go back up here and we can now select the corresponding handler, correct handler, which is the load list table and 3 resource with on page load. Okay, so first step is done. Second step, what we want to do is to drag and drop a table inside of this main div. So let's drag and drop here a table, and we want to have 2 rows and 1 column. Okay, and in this first column, well, first of all let's put the type of the table as this type here, list table, and then let's set for each individual rows we need to set the row item type, so then the system knows that it needs to replicate that specific lines. So to do that we need to show here the layers. We select the column so you can show here, and we select here the row, and then we set that row as a row item. We do the same thing for the second one. Okay, and now the system basically will replicate these 2 rows. Okay, so then we can select the first column, where basically what we're going to do is to show the name, the attribute name in here. The attribute name. Okay, and in here what we want to do is to show the files, but we cannot do this. So basically we cannot put the files here and then the handler. What we need to show is, first we need to show a table inside of here, and then inside of that table, that's where we're gonna show the attributes. Why? Because then you're gonna get the rows, and you want to append the rows to the table, because we cannot append rows to a column. So we need to append rows to a table. So we need first to drag and drop a table here, and then we can select the corresponding attributes. So let's go back to the widgets. Let's drag and drop a table inside of here, which in this case we want an empty table. So we can simply go here to the body and we want to delete it because we want an empty table. We select that empty table, and now we can set the display resource attributes, where we're gonna say that we want to show here the files, but now we want to show the files with the corresponding handler, which will be the draw list data recursive. So if we save this, well, as a matter of fact, in this table we can set some classes. Let's put some margin, and let's put some border, and by default this table the system sets some width, so let's just put a small width, something like this, 100 pixels. Okay, let's save, and if we preview this page, now we can see that we have the first one, which was that we did before, the list, and then below here we have our tree, but based in tables. As you can see, a table, this is a table inside of another tables. This is another way of showing recursive data. So one way is to do it through tables inside with inner tables. Another way is to do it through ULs and LIs, through a lists elements. So these like basically two different ways of doing exactly the same thing, showing complex structures in a recursive way. And that's it. So thank you very much.